Fuck.
Good start. Good start.
We are live. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming into episode 3 of the Bayou Banana and the Boys reacting to Masters of the Air, a show by Apple TV. Episode 3 was rough, in my opinion. Before we get started on that, I just want to show one thing. I showed the bottom two guys a photo of this, but it looks a
No
little
doubt.
different when it's in the arm. It's a 105 millimeter shell. Now the Germans were shooting 120 millimeter or an 88, so this is a good in between of the flak rounds and whatnot. So yeah,
So
keep
how?
this in your mind.
Okay. So you have the shell casing.
Yeah.
So that when they shoot it, that flies out.
Yeah, the
That
bullet
has
would come out to here,
yes,
and
and
that's the one
that's
that's
full of the
flying.
powder, right? That's
Yes.
full of the yes.
Yes. So the Germans were the flak. You would think it was just like a dumbfire. They actually had it radar controlled and elevation controlled. So it would blow up on proximity to the planes and then just
Got
send
it.
billions of shards everywhere. So they weren't actually trying to hit the plane with the flak, but get near, and then the shrapnel would damage the
Yeah.
engines.
So explain that like depth wise, right? Because I was trying to like explain it to my wife. Like she's like, can't they just go up above them? Can't they just go beneath them? Explain
So
that by.
they could shoot it up into fucking like it would go forever. Like that's a huge shell and whatnot. And so they could go higher or lower, but there's different slipstreams and everything that you're trying to stay on. And plus, moving all of that would make your fuel consumption go higher because climbing is not just an easier thing. Um, and yeah. And as you could tell, like anytime they were gonna go into formation, they had to shoot the flare. Like a lot of things that we don't see is that this airborne campaign of bombing was really in infancy. That it was very new. They hadn't been doing it for very long, and then it kind of like this is the last time it was ever done. Like there was some bombing in Korea and Vietnam, but nothing on this scale.
Yeah, maybe we can talk about that later too, like them getting
Yeah.
information. Because I have a couple questions about that. Actually, you might be able to
Okay. Yeah.
answer.
So first, I'm going to start with Baleen, and then I'll go Eddie, and then Philly in 30 seconds. Episode 3. Like, what were your thoughts after watching it? Because before I have you go, I just sat there and just clasped my hands, and I was just like, wow. Like, it makes you think of in the beginning of Saving Private Ryan. Like after that scene, you're just like on edge the entire time, and you're just like, will it stop? Like, when is this going to end? Because my butt is sucking up the seat cushion and I was eating it. So yeah, Baleen, what 30 seconds.
Okay, 30 seconds. I thought it was terrifying the entire time. I felt, just like you said, I felt like I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. I didn't know what was coming next. I didn't know which character was going to be alive. In my head, initially, before I don't want to dive deep into it,
Appreciate
I
it. Count
thought
it.
X, Y, and Z character were going to make it through the entire series. Got proved wrong. So now I'm left wondering, okay, which character is actually safe, which character is not, without diving too deep into the history and kind of spoiling it for myself. I was on edge the entire time.
Yeah,
The entire time.
I've made a point of not to look up some of the characters because I don't want to see if they if they made it or whatnot. Mm. All right, Eddie, what 30 seconds, real quick.
Yeah, I made the mistake of looking up each of
Oh
the main
no.
characters, and so I knew what was going to happen in this episode. I knew to one of the characters what was going to happen. Um, so I already saw that coming. But yeah, it was more brutal, more emotional than the previous two, and I knew it was going to come eventually. I thought it was going to be the Black Thursday episode, which then I thought this was, and only for that to be coming, it's going to only get worse. But it just shows with these guys. I mean, they're basically this and submarine warfare in World War II are petrifying to me. They're basically to me kind of the same things. You're
Mm-hmm.
in a submarine into the sky, or you're in a cone, metal cone in the sky. You're in a metal cone under the water, and you can't get away from it. At
Yeah.
least from the sky, you could bail out. In the water, you kind of can bail out, which
Yeah.
some were successful, but it's terrifying is the word. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
terrifying.
Yeah. There's Yeah, this is about Masters of the Air. Sorry, but sorry, I was talking to the chat. But yeah, it's there's no foxholes up in the air or in a submarine. You're just kind of there. You just have to brave the elements. Philly, what were you thinking?
Yeah, and I probably bring a different perspective to this whole group because unlike you guys who obviously live this for your careers, or I know like Eddie and Ben Bayou, not sure about you, Baleen, big history buffs and such. I'm not necessarily don't necessarily know the history of what's going on with this. I'm more so like knew the some of the infantry stuff going on because I followed obviously family history from that point. I had a grandfather in the in the tanks on storming Normandy after the initial push. But it's really intriguing to me to see how this whole air battle goes. How there was like cockiness, arrogance between all these guys, calling them the flying fortresses. Thought that it was kind of foolproof, and you could see some hesitation, and then things obviously started going more and more wrong throughout the whole process, and the terror on everybody's faces just kind of dropped. But I think they do a really good job showing the emotion. Number one in this series, and then two, I was a little worried. I could think about how these like battle scenes were going to go with it not being like, hey, let me just take 20 seconds of somebody storming up the field and jumping into a foxhole. That's the action right there. But like seeing all the fighters like dipping in and out of combat has been pretty
Yeah,
insane.
I thought about that too. Now that you bring that up, like how were they going to make 2-second engagements into a show or a film? And it's breathtaking. Like the planes are just so fast, and I wonder if they slowed it down or if that's what it would look like, a 250-mile-per-hour planes flying by. I don't know. I've thought about that. Um,
That did. I never thought how difficult the fighter planes would be to shoot down. You always see in movies. I'm thinking of movies like the Memphis Belle, and I can't think of any others off the top of my head right now that are. But that's the one I can think of right now, wherein it's just showing the Flying Fortress. I mean, and they're just gunning fighters down left and right, especially older movies from the '60s. And they're just gunning them down, and you're like, oh, yeah, it's a Flying Fortress because they're just shooting down fighters like crazy. Well, this shows how the hell do you even hit one?
yeah.
I mean, that thing just, yeah, you're like, oh, God.
To me, it's not only do you hit one, but you're so erratic with how you're trying to hit. How are you not hitting your other
The
ships?
other planes.
Yes,
Yeah, the other
exactly.
planes.
How do you not hit the other B-17s? Yeah.
I would 100%.
You just- Ah!
I'd be taking them down left and right, like, oh shit. Here's a stat from this bomb run, which I found amazing. There were 400 German fighters that attacked them. 400.
Yeah,
It said there's 400 109s, 110s, and 190s, and other fighters is what it says.
What
And
were those planes again? You said the 190, 110, 109?
it says this is from Wikipedia.
Trust
BF 109s, 110, 190s, and then it says and a few other fighters is all it says. And only 25 of those were shot down. 400 of them.
Yeah.
Only 25 were shot down.
Amazing, more of that group wasn't lost on, right?
Yeah. So we'll get into that. Like that's part of like the mission. Spoilers, if anyone's in there, count it. So yeah, if you need to leave, appreciate you following, viewing a little bit. But yeah, get out of here. Don't want to spoil. But
Get out of here.
10 seconds for him to leave. Yeah, we're going right into it. So it was supposed to be 3 different air wings going up because they had the 100th bomb group, and then they were supposed to meet up, and then 2 others were supposed to be going, and that was the whole point, is that the strength of numbers and everything, and then they would go off down to Africa.
Meeting in the channel.
Exactly. But that didn't happen. So they got the whole brunt of the attack force on themselves. So 400 fighters. And I'm glad you brought that up with the 110 Eddies, because that's the first we've seen of the 110s, which was a German plane that shot those rockets.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people didn't know that they had rockets.
That kind of surprised me.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I was like, oh man, everyone's just being shot down by, machine guns and stuff at this point. Then all of a sudden these rockets come flying in. I was like, I literally looked at my wife and my jaw was just dropped and she was just like wide eyes in disbelief of what happened.
Yeah. The rockets were real crazy, and it's soon they're going to start strapping steel beams to the 190's wings, and they just crash into the wings of the B-17 to take them down when the ammunition shortage is going to happen. But thank God.
Which is insane. Can you imagine being that pilot making that decision?
I had some questions kind of on the history of this, right? Where were those other two groups supposed to be taking off from? I assumed that everybody was taking off from the same airstrip, and so when things started like kind of falling apart, then they said, "Oh, with the fog, we might be delayed. We might be delayed. We might be delayed." I didn't realize that all these other groups were taking off from other other Air Force bases, military bases, whatever they were back then.
We had
Go
Air
ahead,
Force
Eddie.
bases everywhere in England,
Over 200.
especially in. So there you go. Especially in southeastern England, like around where my grandmother's from, Essex area. There's airbase everywhere. It was like every 30 miles there's another Army airbase, and they have monuments to them there today. You go to every single one of them, and RAF air bases. So
No idea, McGriddles.
these B-17s are in
What?
several air bases spread out, and so they're just taking off from other ones. Yeah,
Why were they delayed?
Weather.
yeah.
Yeah, so general.
Everybody was delayed because of weather,
Yes.
but only this group just got orders to actually take off.
Yeah.
Clear everything out.
That was kind of like the confusion, is that he wanted them to go because he knew they weren't going to get hit by fighters on the way back, because they were going down to Africa. So that was the whole thing, is he was like, all right, if they could just get that first wave, because the fighters would go up, go back down and refuel, and know that they could catch them on their way back. That was the whole reason why they went to Africa, and why he sent them up, was because he knew that they were only going to get that one wave of the fighters and everything.
I didn't know, why didn't they just fucking pick the phone up and call the other bases? I didn't understand that part. I mean, that's real history too. So
Yeah.
it's not just why they do that in the show. That actually happened. I don't understand how that happened.
I don't know.
I don't-
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd have to dive more into it, because it was like shitty. It's like, what are they doing? Like, why? Like, you just sent them, and the colonel, I think it was the lieutenant colonel, maybe. Do you remember Baleen, who's in charge of the 100th? Yeah, he was like, they're facing everybody and they're going down. Yeah, that is. I did have some notes, some things that I wanted to talk about that I had up.
While you're looking at that, you mentioned them landing in Africa. I found in the show, it appeared there was no ground crew where they landed. There's nothing. There was no one there. What was the deal with all that?
The 15th Air Force should be there, so I don't know.
Yeah, because in the show they were like, there was no one there. Then I was like, well, how are you even going to get resupplied? Refuel? Like, what the hell?
Refueled.
I
you
don't
gonna
know.
get your-
That just
Hey.
might be like a production thing rather than like a
A
Yeah,
cliffhanger.
yeah.
Yeah.
because
Thanks,
you
Tom
know,
Hanks.
Yeah.
It would
It's
probably
Tom
be
Hanks'
like
fault.
another 30 minutes just to explain like the air crew to introduce new characters, things like that.
Well, no,
I
they
guess,
could just
I
show
guess
the,
so,
they
but at
could just
least
show
show
the
them
cars
running,
driving up and-
running
yeah.
over to help out, and then you're like, oh, okay, I'm a little more settled down.
Yeah, that was weird. They were like, "Let me go get this Kuba wagon," and then they just out of nowhere come up with a Jeep, and I was
In
like,
Yeah.
the middle of freaking nowhere.
"Yeah, it's just a German Jeep that they just yoinked."
And it literally that whole scene made it look like they were just in the desert by themselves in the middle of nowhere. And I was like, well, you got to have your ships repaired. You got to. I mean, what's happening here? Where is everything?
Yeah, I am curious. I guess the 15th mechanics and everything will have to patch them up. Which me, being a mechanic, I'd be mad as fuck if some other guys came back and brought their planes and they were just shot to shit. And it's just like, not only do I have to take care of my planes, but now these assholes come down. Like, I guess it's a little different if they were like fighting the war or whatnot. But
Oh yeah, you got shot up. Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
you would be a douchebag.
all I know is that when planes would come from Little Rock or Texas to Germany, and they were just like, "Hey, see you later. We're going to the bar." It's like, who the fuck are you?
Is that the
Man.
same thing as Africa?
Rams-
Yeah,
yeah.
Arkansas is.
Yeah, Arkansas. Okay, so some things that it was hard to watch. Wow, yeah, this one was definitely rough. Had you saw a lot of forts going down and everything, which was crazy. The discipline in some of those pilots to just when Buck, and I think going to this is one of my points, is that the character development on Buck, when he's just like, "Hey, we're gonna sit here and we're gonna take it, you asshole,"
Yeah.
just showing like, "Hey, we're doing this for something bigger than ourselves. Like, these ball bearings are extremely important. We got to get rid of them." And that, yeah, and
Yeah,
later,
what an amazing job, man.
yeah, it's the balls on him and everything.
Acting too. He's been great.
Yeah, a lot of people didn't like the cast of Austin Butler, and like, I don't know. I liked him in the Elvis movie, but I like
think
him.
his calmness is what is perfect for this role.
Yeah, for sure.
See, I don't really like him that much in this show. He's my least favorite.
I don't
He's my
know.
least favorite.
I would say
I mean,
it's
he was amazing in Elvis, but this he seems too like sultry. Just he's like putting it on too much. Like, oh no, oh, look at my lips though.
I don't think he did that once.
Oh, he's done it. At
Hey,
least, I mean, I get hot and sweaty about it, so I don't know.
I think for me, whenever I see Buck, and one of the like points I have was kind of like a coming of age, basically, for Buck,
nah,
because
he
you have
was
to
a
think like all
electrician,
these
or he
dudes
still
are
is. He's
young,
in the Air Force still.
like maybe 24, 25. They're still young men, you know. Um, I think it's a huge character development for Buck because you see it in his eyes of that slow motion scene of them flying through the flak and planes flying everywhere, men jumping out of their planes and hitting other planes. You know, you see it in his eyes that
Hmm.
it's kind of like this. Oh crap! This is happening, and you see it in his eyes at the end of the show, right before they went to the credits. About just
yeah.
you're
Sure,
starting
Buck.
to see
Sure,
a
Bucky. Yeah.
development. You're starting to see a development of him,
Yeah.
um,
I think
kind of growing.
to your point, Baleen, right? That actually probably was the most second powerful part of that episode for me was seeing that body
I'm ground
fly off
crew.
that
What are you
wing.
talking about, Griddles?
Oh yeah.
I was just it was just one of those
Didn't
shocking
expect
moments.
it.
I was absolutely not, absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think too is like one of the moments that really got me, and I'm sure we'll jump into it. And this is whenever I was going back to say like no character is safe. Um, One of the main characters, I guess. Well, he's not really a main character. I guess he's more of a supporting role.
Who? Biddick?
I can't. Yeah,
Kurt?
you
Yeah.
know. Yeah, like I'll be honest, that was one of the most
Yeah.
heart-wrenching moments for me in the show because I like him as an actor. Especially he's been in a couple great movies thus far. He's starting to show really well in Hollywood and everything like that. He's really good, and I thought they were going to use him a lot more.
Yeah, he's a big actor now. Yeah.
Yeah, and so to have him, kind of be kaput, that scene in itself was so
Yeah.
heart wrenching because you don't really get to see what these guys are thinking about before a plane crash and things like that. And you just see it on his eyes of, oh God, like his eyes just getting widened and then it's over.
And he could have
Especially
bailed.
after the last episode, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That whole big development, getting the three pals together, we're coming to rescue our buddy. It's good to have friends in high places. And then it goes right to this episode. Nothing anybody could have done to help him.
He could have bailed.
And
He could have, but I mean,
Yeah, he did it because he was trying to help that co-pilot.
you had that
Yeah.
character development,
well,
right?
in real life, he didn't crash land and do that. In real life, it was an oxygen fire in the nose and fuselage that trapped them in the flight deck, killing all of them in the flight deck immediately.
Mm.
shit.
And the rest bailed out. It said 4 of them were killed, but the rest got out.
That was also really powerful too. Is after all these fortresses kind of went up, and you have everybody counting parachutes,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
they
yeah.
had that one scene where the navigator,
Oh yeah.
Crosby, where he was trying to mark. He was like, "When did they go down?" so that we can possibly know where he's hiding and whatnot and everything, and counting the parachutes. Yeah, that's
He's
Yeah,
he's my favorite character now. He's become my favorite character.
it
I
was
could do
just-
without the
yes,
needless
thank you.
vomit.
The vomiting because I'm like a sympathetic puker, so when other people are vomiting, I'm just like,
Well, he's my favorite character because he's so his acting is really well done. He's very very believable. Where he's in panic mode. He's worried. He's scared. He's sick. I mean, and you're freaking out with him. Like, oh my God, is he not going to get him at the wrong place? And you're always worried. Like, is he doing what's happening? And I don't know. I find his character really compelling, and he's become my favorite. And I get motion sickness very easily. So
I can't help but think of Matthew Broderick every time I look at him. He reminds me exactly of like a young Matthew
yeah,
Broderick.
that's true. I see
Huh.
that now. Good lord.
I'd have to say, I don't know. I have to look.
Episode 4. Keep your eye out.
I haven't looked what happens to him though. I'm not going to look anymore. I'm not going to
Thanks.
look.
He wrote a book. So
Oh,
Well,
Okay.
thanks, buddy.
well, now we know he lives. Thank you, ruined it.
Unless he
I
wrote
mean-
it in the back of the plane the whole time.
I don't know, but part of his book is like influence for the show and everything. I think that's why he has such a big role and everything.
got you.
Yeah.
You.
Because
Cha.
he'd keep that journal and whatnot, and he was the group's navigator.
Navigator.
Yeah, so that's the importance of the factory they were going for. So Eddie kind of mentioned it earlier that he thought this was going to be, it was the same area, but they were
Yeah.
hitting it in this episode because they've hit it multiple times. A ball bearing factory in Schweinfurt. And some people are just like, yo, what the fuck? We got ball bearings and all of our rolling chairs and everything. Like, what's the importance? But I was Googling it, and bearings were a vital component in tanks, airplanes, machine guns, the heavy artillery, and submarines by the Germans. Like, it was a couple thousand ball bearings went into every single tank. So it was extremely necessary in that part where he's like, the Germans can't work without ball bearings and whatnot. It's extremely
Yeah.
important part. So that's why.
And-
What were you saying?
I was gonna say maybe now might be timely for that too. Do we know what happened to the other 2 points that were supposed to be hit? Like, did those bomber groups ever make it to the other points? Did those other 2? I think they might have been factories. Ever actually get hit?
I'm not sure. Well, it's kind of like in the first episode, I believe they went up and then they didn't drop because of the cloud coverage and everything.
Mhm.
Like they have secondary targets that they could possibly go for. It's like on their way back, they have a secondary target in mind, and then if not, then they drop it over the ocean. So
Yeah.
hopefully they
And
aren't
so-
out there just killing a
And
bunch
sorry,
of cods.
I didn't watch last episode, by so apologize for that. But did you guys talk about this bomb sites that they have and why they were so important? I
Oh.
haven't looked those up yet.
The Norden Bob site. Baleen,
Yeah.
you want to tackle this at all, or?
No, you've got it.
Oh, so the Norden bomb site was probably the second best kept secret besides the Manhattan Project. It just allowed all of our bomber crews to just be extremely accurate. And I don't know if you've seen the movie Unbroken, but when they found out that he was a bombardier, the Japanese were torturing him to get information about this bomb site because they could put bombs on target from up at 20,000 feet and whatnot when other belligerents could not, and everything. And so this bomb site and the fact that we had a 4-engine bomber and the Germans and the Japanese, we'll stick with the Germans, but they didn't. The Germans couldn't bomb out England or hurt the runways because you hit one engine and then they have one engine and their plane's going down. But with the fort, I mean, you saw there at the end, Buck was flying on 2 engines, 1 engine, and then at the end, like he was just gliding. Like we had these big bombers with this technological advance of the bomb site which could be mass produced. Like that's another thing that Buck, when he told them all to dump all their gear, he's like, "We'll get more." Like the production.
Yeah.
The
But
assembly
even
lines,
with
yeah.
that, they were like even the site.
Yeah.
Like they were making a big deal about throwing that thing, and they're like, "Oh, it's into the water. It's
Yeah.
fine. They're never gonna find it."
Yeah, because if they did, it could have possibly made the Germans more of a threat and everything instead of them. Because before
They never
would
got
have
it after like any of those scrapped planes that crashed or anything like that. Never found them.
now the concussion and everything would be broken, I'm sure, or burned up. Hopefully, I wonder if they ever did get any. That's a Google for sure. Yeah. Ow! Little turd, she bit me. My cat, not my wife.
I hope your wife's not down there.
Yeah. Jesus Christ. So there was one scene, where Bucky didn't want to bail out and was saying he didn't want to spend his time in the was it Stalag or something, or a Stalag or something. God damn it, I should know this. But I'm reading this book called Shot Down. It's a memoir of Howard Snyder, who was a pilot of a B-17, and they talk about some of the crews and this ties into when that other kid got shot down, and the Belgians were asking him like, "Hey, like you have a choice here. Do you want to just give yourself up to the Germans and you'll be treated better?" And Baleen and I talked about this in the last episode. All of the air crew were made officers or non-commissioned officers, NCOs, because they would get treated better. If you were lower enlisted, they treated you like shit, and kind of our military does too, or whatever. But so the Belgians gave them that choice. It's like you can either hide and you'll possibly get killed, or you can go into the concentration or the the camp, the POW
Prisoner of war,
camps.
yeah.
Yeah. And that you could go to a concentration camp if you were found evading.
Yeah, there's some of those German POW camps. There's I can't remember the name of them. There's one I believe was like in Poland. There was a big castle, and they kept a bunch of POWs in the castle. And mostly those are British POWs who were shot down, and they were treated, other than they couldn't leave. They were fed very well. They had a banquet hall. They were to give them alcohol and all kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
several of them escaped several times and would get caught and escape again and get caught. And, yeah, so like you said, some officers they didn't treat too terribly.
No, that was part because before the war, there was a part of the Geneva Convention was like, hey,
Mhm.
this is how you'll treat people. The Russians didn't sign into that, and
Mhm.
they kind of suffered bad because over 1 million men, I think, were killed in POW camps on the Russian side. It was astronomical. They just didn't have food, so they either let them starve or they would shoot them.
And that's like at the end of the war, the Germans are trying to run to the American side to get captured. They did
Yeah.
trying to avoid the Russians. Yeah.
But the person, so his name's not Babyface. What was his name? The waist gunner.
Yeah.
That scene
Uh,
when he's
oh, when he
like,
couldn't get out. Oh my
can't help
god.
him.
That was rough.
Yeah.
Mm.
That was tough. I imagine living with that.
Oh
Right?
my
Just,
god.
just having that in your head the entire time.
That's what I thought. Like
Of you
to
at
live
night.
with I would feel like I did that to that guy. Like I killed that guy, my friend. I can't.
Yeah.
But there's nothing you could do. I mean, there's nothing the guy could do. He had to get out, or he was going to die too. I mean, it's just, it's terrible. It's
Yeah,
terrible.
that was a rough scene because you saw he wanted, and then like the plane blew up and that was rough. You saw in the expert, they're like on episode 4, they ask him like, "Hey, where's Babyface?" And it's like, "Oh, jeez, like, oh, that's gonna haunt him."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that just like when you're crashing, it amazes me that you could even get out. That you can get your stuff ready, that you can and get out. I mean, that you're not just flying around the plane hitting like you could
Yeah.
actually get out of the damn thing.
We
That
talked
That
about
plane
this
amazes
like
me.
that.
talked about this last episode. They didn't train for that. The first time they ever
Oh,
pulled a
really?
parachute was when they jumped out. At no
What?
time. So like you see Band of Brothers and everything, the training, like they had
Yeah.
multiple jumps. Not for the Army Air Corps. The first
Oh,
time they
That's
jumped out
wild.
was when
oh my
they called it
god.
their silk ribbon or something. It was like silk virginity in this book is because the parachutes were made of silk, and
Yeah.
so they called it a club. Like the first time you ever had to pull that parachute and everything. Um, but it's like I
Fuck.
said before, this whole bomber thing was in its infancy, and they never practiced bailing out. And so part of that, and it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, my grandma's wedding dress was made from parachute silk.
Mm, that is
Yeah.
wild.
Just an interesting fact.
Mm. Chinese?
What?
Was it Chinese silk?
No, from parachute. My grandfather. Oh, I don't know where the silk was made. Shit.
Yeah, I don't know either. That's why I
It was
was
from a
like,
B-26 crew. I know that.
goodness.
I'm
Uh,
excited how they're gonna bring in the red tails.
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Is that gonna be something where the perspective is kind of shift onto them, or are they just gonna be kind of like uh like just a character introduction? You know what I mean? Like, are we
Yeah.
gonna get any perspective from the red tails from a fighter's perspective, um, escorting these bombers, or are we just gonna stick with the bomber groups?
Well, Eddie, Philly, you guys had some questions about the fighters in our LSU Sports Only chat. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, why aren't our fighters in there kind of trying to help?
I didn't have a question. I knew. I knew the answer. That's what I'm
You
saying.
you knew the questions were from all the dumb questions are for me.
No.
But it's a good perspective to bring because I'm pretty clueless, so I'm watching this like fresh eyes here.
Well, I think
Do you know why? Why there were no fighters involved?
I do now because of Bayou, but I'd love to hear your perspective of
Oh
it. Blaine.
no! If Bayou's
no,
already
no, no. Baleen,
told
go.
you. Okay, so one of the main reasons is because some of our fighters that were developed during this time, they didn't have drop tanks yet. Drop tanks weren't a thing for the fighters to have.
What are
You
drop
know what
tanks?
drop tanks are? Basically external tanks that were the fighters were able to take off from the airfields from, and then to shed load, they're just feeding off the fuel that's in these drop tanks.
Got it.
And then whenever they drop the tanks,
Like a space
they
shuttle.
it's just all the fuel that's in the wings now that they'll be able to use. They'll be able to maneuver better and things like that.
Got
So
it.
if it, by you tell me if I'm wrong here, the P-47 was in use here, and the P-51 was still kind of new, being tested, being manufactured, and things like that. So we'll see the P-51s in the early part of 1944. So right now we're kind of the fall time frame, September, October time frame in the show.
I
We'll
think
probably
August.
pick up
We're in August, yeah.
August.
Hmm.
So you got to think that they're going to probably spend some time in um, Africa right now, um, in the desert, and they'll probably get back ready to go for missions. I know that we're coming up on one of the bloodiest days for the 100th. That's going to be a heart wrenching episode, I think. Going back to what I was saying earlier, no character is safe. You know, I think we're going to get to a halfway point of where it's one of the bloodiest days for the bomb group, and then we're going to get new faces, replacements that are coming in, and it's going to be a new character development for them. Probably have a couple characters, 3 or 4 characters that we know of right now, stay behind because they lived throughout the war. I don't know everybody's story, but it's just kind of what I'm expecting. But we're going to get a new, fresh perspective, probably from the replacements coming up, and
And
it's
then
it's just
after that Black Thursday episode, yeah, I suppose there'll be a couple episodes after that or so when the Tuskegee show up, because then that's when they'll have fighter support.
yeah.
Uh, so I'm guessing within the next 2 episodes it's going to be. It's either the next one or the one after is going to be the Black Thursday, because it was only a couple months after this bomb run,
I
so
can
it's
see
going to be
next
soon.
episode being like one of those lull episodes. Sometimes
Yeah,
like
yeah,
Band of Brothers of the Pacific always had like those couple,
yeah.
like 2 episodes a season where not much happened, a lot of
Well, character
development.
development and yeah.
Hmm.
Hopefully, avoid the love story stuff that
You're
Pacific got
talking
into.
about P-47s, and this mission alone, there was a P-47 fighter group that shot down 16 German planes. Um, and there
They
was a
did come
spit.
in.
Well, at the beginning, so they could go with escort them to a degree, and then they have to go back, and then the B-17s are alone. For some reason in the show, they don't show that at all. They don't show
I
any
actually
fighter
think did
support.
they show them once they took off? I think I saw a few. Is that not right?
I didn't notice any.
So those P-47s could have been with the other bomb groups as
True.
well. The second and third bomb wings actually, not the
There was a
group.
Spitfire group as well that shot down 8.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, they could really
just
only get them over the English Channel, and then
yeah,
they had to turn around and refuel and whatnot. And that was the big problem with the daytime bombing as well, which we talked about last episode with episode 2 and the Brits and everything. It's like it's just suicide, but them taking out the factory because you look and Buck asks that ball turret and he's like, "Hey, how do we do?" And he's like, "It's gone," and
yeah.
everything. Like that's pretty freaking nuts.
And the Germans really had no. They couldn't come back from that at this
No.
late in the war. They couldn't come back from us taking out that infrastructure. There was no coming back, and that's why later in the war, every time you destroy a tank, when they would destroy one of our Sherman tanks, well, like the next day we got 4 more rolling up behind it. We destroy one of their tanks, it's not coming back. They're not getting any more of them back
Mhm.
because of all this that these bombers did ahead of time. It was done.
Yeah, the British were
So
doing bombing more for psychological warfare, just trying to beat down the German morale, to where the Allies or the Americans were doing more strategic bombing. It was still carpet bombing, but it was still usually on targets to try to. I don't know if they were avoiding civilian casualties because civilians worked in the factories, but it was military infrastructure. So, yeah.
I think
yeah,
that shows just a clear difference between the Brits and the U.S. during World War II when it came to bombing. And you kind of study the history, like everybody. I think it was a couple years ago. Um, they talk about there was talks about the Brits bombings, in is it Dreisberg? It's one up
Dresden.
north. Dresden.
It's
The
Dresden.
Dresden bombing, and if you know anything about that, that is just awful.
Yeah, they burnt
But
the whole
Oh,
town
it's
down.
terrible.
war. It is war, and the Brits kind of,
Firebombed them. Yeah.
Yeah, they're
they
also coming at it from like a revenge perspective, though, right?
But to be
So we
exactly.
fair,
necessarily weren't on that front.
I'm looking at it right here. There was 527 B-17s bombed Dresden.
Whew.
So it wasn't just the Brits.
So that was more than the 3 wings they were planning on bringing in for this one.
527 B-17 and 784 P-51 Mustangs. What the hell? 784.
Yeah, that's insane.
And they firebombed Dresden and the RAF too. I mean, it was them too, but it was just as much us as it was them. Killed 25,000 civilians
Mm.
and destroyed Dresden. I mean, it's gone.
This is away from the show, but the Americans did the same thing over Japan. And I'm not
Oh,
even
yeah.
talking about the
No.
nukes. I'm talking about the fire bombings of Tokyo killed, I
Oh,
think, double
awful.
the amount that the nukes did. And so,
Well,
Dresden,
what is the old saying? War is hell. I mean, nothing's good. Nothing's good in it.
yeah.
You gotta be. I don't know. There's you gotta beat the person who's being more bad than you are. That's the
Yeah.
hope. But everyone's being bad if you really think about it. War is hell.
Yeah. So I'm looking over my notes and everything that I had. This was a rough episode. Like we've said a couple times, the no foxhole thing. Like they're just up there.
Yeah, it's a nightmare.
Yeah. The people trying to bail out. That is nuts. I'm concerned. So one, I don't know the history of Biddick, so I don't know if he lived through that. I want to hope he did, but it doesn't look good, to be honest. I'm tempted to ask Eddie if he just wants to disclose it.
I already said something a
never-
while ago. If you didn't hear me,
I don't know.
Nope.
I know he crashed. I don't know if he died though. It probably doesn't look good though. But the people who bailed out over the water and they're 350 miles to land, like what the heck?
ah, shit.
And this is like they don't have these like nowadays. If we have beacons in our planes that as soon as water touches them, it sends off a GPS and everything, and they know where it went down. They don't have that. They're gonna one, the grounds crew people have to relay because they're gonna get debriefed, and then they're gonna have to go talk to the Navy or send out these other planes, and then they'll go look for them, and then they find them, and then they have to go and contact the Navy and be like, hey, they're going here, and then hope they find them. Like God, I don't know.
Well, I found this interesting. I guess I'm the facts guy.
Yeah,
I keep looking up all these facts.
Jamie, can you pull that up?
There was in this bomb run, the first one, there was 557 air crewmen who were missing in action or POW. 557.
So
Not-
that is 56 B-17s.
That's MIA or POW. There was amazingly only 7 killed in action.
So a lot were able to bail out.
Yeah, so for some reason, way more of them bailed out of this one, and then in the Black Thursday one, there's
Don't tell me.
500 and well, you know, Black Thursday is like the worst. You know, it's going to be a lot worse.
I know.
There's 590 killed in action in Black Thursday,
Jesus Christ.
compared to 7 killed in action in this one, and 557 bailed out. So what's the difference? Why did so many of them get to bail out of this one, but they didn't in the next one? Wow. Maybe the show will explain that. I don't know. I don't know.
Where they're bailing out could be a thing. Because if you're bailing out there in flak, that's not a good place to be bailing out. I mean, it looked like fighters was the big thing in this episode, at least for the 100th, in the 2 squadrons that we saw, because the one got decimated pretty quickly. Where are they landing, I guess, is another thing. Because if you land in the forest and you hit a tree, then you're killed hitting the tree and whatnot. Yeah, there's a number of factors.
Why was the comm so bad between the actual bombers, right? Because it seemed like in this one, before this episode, I thought, okay, well, they just didn't have access to communicate with other ships.
Yeah.
But this one, it kind of showed them switching their radios and were able to communicate at least with the squad, the actual bomb group leaders.
Mm-hmm. So one thing that you can try to jam by like just broadcasting on the same signal and whatnot, because if the Germans knew which frequency that they were talking on, they could just go and blare a bunch of music, and that's like how early jamming worked and whatnot. You kind of see that in the movie Greyhound. Like the Germans would just keep switching channels until they found out which ones the boats were on, and they would just try to do psychological warfare. Um, Another thing with the comms is that I guess with everything's going on, well, the radio operator's the one who can be swapping that. And Buck's plane, he got killed. That's the guy who got his legs taken off by
Yeah.
that shell or the 20 millimeter, and his legs were gone. So, and he died. So now, then he was specifically trained to work that radio, and that could be why they weren't able to communicate and everything. Yeah.
And Murphy, you asked earlier how'd they do on the other targets. I was looking; they completely destroyed a Messerschmitt. That's a fighter plane factory. Completely wiped it out. And Albert Speer, he was like an architect of the Nazi Party, actual architect, like building. He was
Financial.
gonna build the basically a Rome in Germany, and that's what he was starting to do with Munich. But he became the minister of like armaments
No, he
and
was the CFO. He was starting their whole economy and everything.
um,
See, I don't think CFO was the term, but Albert Speer.
minister of armaments and war production.
So yeah, like the CFO, because he was doing their whole war economy.
And he was a German architect, but it said in here, quoted that he said after this bombing run, he reported they had a 34% loss of all military production after this one bombing run. 34%. That's insane.
Wow.
So it was a massive success, in numbers, and really, if you look at what I say, it was 7 killed in action. That's pretty damn impressive.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't even know how that was possible. I don't understand.
How long would it have taken those? Do we think those German fighters to go back, refuel, and get back out there? You're talking about hours, probably.
Yeah.
I would say about 2 hours.
I was just trying to think, like, depending on how long those other bombers came behind them, right? I wonder if they would have even sustained any type of casualties besides the shells going up, if they really had
I'm sure they did.
besides if they really had any other resistance.
Besides just like during the amount of sorties that they were flying in World War II, and then the meth that they were giving the German fighter pilots so that they could stay awake and everything. Yeah, I don't know if you knew that, but they would actually have prescribed methamphetamines that they would give to pilots and tank commanders to have them be able to function and work harder.
Jeez,
Yeah.
Yeah.
can't imagine that.
Yeah, they called it Panzer Schokolade for the tanks, and it was just meth infused chocolate.
Dang, I'll have to look more into that because that's, I mean,
Yeah, that is
my
insane.
my grandfather was the leader of his tank.
Yeah.
It was the Germans who were doing it.
I know. But I'm just saying it's interesting seeing it from the other side.
We were giving our guys acid. No.
Giving them Lucky Stripes is what they were giving them.
Yeah. And saying they're good for your lungs.
Yeah.
They open up your lungs. Here, smoke these.
I was reading more into his group recently. He literally went in as cavalry, like on a horse. He trained on a horse, and during that period, they actually like decided to start mass producing these tanks. And they're basically just like, all right, all you guys who are on horses are now in tanks.
We're gonna put you in this tank.
Yeah.
That's tank warfare, and also the air war is just so in its infancy that they're just, it's a crapshoot. They're like, yeah, because the pilots in because I'm listening to a podcast. His name is Lucky, and he was saying that they could fly above the flak. They didn't think that the flak was going to be able to hit them. They thought they'd be flying over it, and then they're like, yeah, the fort is strong. It can take these hits. You're fine. Like, yeah, they were just kind of. It was a crapshoot, and they were just like, yeah, all this and everything, and they just didn't know.
And just the kind of person you have to be to volunteer, like the submarine crewman. Like, yeah, I'll go do that. I'm gonna volunteer to do that. I mean, the kind you're either brave or you're insane. There's a little bit of mixer of both.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you've ever been on a War II submarine. I've been on them. Like they have the museums, like the USS Alabama has that one you can go on and walk, and you're like, people lived in this. Like what? Can you imagine being in this during combat? I went up in a B-17. They have that one that travels. They have that. What are they called? The Honor something. I can't remember what they're called. B-17,
CAF?
P-47, and they fly around together, and you can go up, pay to go up in it and stuff.
One that just crashed.
Yes, I went up in that exact one that crashed about 2 years before it crashed. It was here in Natchitoches. Landed here. You could pay to go up on it and stuff. And same thing, flying up in that was like, I can't imagine being on this. That'd be terrifying. But yeah, 2 years later, it crashed, doing the exact same thing it did here. People paid, were up in it, and all those people died. And it kind of gave me heart palpitations when I read it.
Commemorative Air Force is what they're called.
Yes, yeah.
CAF.
They used to come here every year, but after that, they haven't been back. So I don't know. They must not be doing it at all anymore with the rest of the planes, because you could go up in a P-47 and everything.
Yeah, that's nuts. P-47.
That was way more expensive. It was like $1,500 for like 30 minutes or something like that.
Jesus Christ.
So I didn't do that one.
Did you guys have any more questions? Anything that
No,
you guys were seeing?
We kind of talked about the end towards the beginning of this. You know, it
Yeah.
was a little anticlimactic at the end. They kind of landed, and that was it. You know, it felt a little corny at the end where Buck's plane landed and looked like he was just sitting on the runway, and then all of a sudden the plane was landing right behind him, and I was like, oh well, that's a little weird. And then it's like, oh well, I guess he was off to the side a little bit, but
definitely
just seemed like they were landing on sand. I don't know how they spotted a runway out there.
Yeah, me neither.
Right in the middle of the desert. It's like, why the hell is there even a base here right now?
It's flat. The only place that is fucking flat. I've landed at those airfields before. They're insane. Yeah.
I'm real interested to see the resistance and how they get the pilot back. Oh, is that one of your planes?
Yep.
Dang.
Just looks like it's just in the middle of the desert.
In the middle of sand, yeah.
Yeah. That could be why there's no ground crew, because the ground crew was in the shade that they made up.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think the next episode's probably them. You know, they'll probably actually explain where this ground crew's coming from, how they're getting fixed up, resupplied. I imagine we're probably not going to get much action out of it, but
yeah,
that's what I'm curious about. How they get all of them back? Because surely they couldn't have we'll just fix up your plane. That's going to take forever. That's why you normally would get a new plane that's already fixed up while they're fixing up those. So how did they get those guys back?
You say that, but a lot of those planes were actually recovered and whatnot. And
but it'd take a while to fix them up, wouldn't it?
They were doing it overnight and everything. In my book, they were saying that they were strapping them up, and that's why they stopped painting them. Baleen and I talked about this in the last episode, that they were saying that the life expectancy of these planes was not even worth painting them because they don't have to worry about corrosion. So they just were like, we'll just send it.
Because I sent it to you, but I got my wife's grandfather was a B-17 pilot and has his records, and he'd be on this plane, and then it'd go into action, and it'd get shot up, and now he's on this plane, and then he'll switch back to the other plane he was on before, and now he switched to another plane because that had damage. It's just switching planes.
Anytime Buck or Bucky or any like the higher ups were going to fly, they would kick the main pilot out, and the co-pilot would either be the tail gunner. In the podcast I'm listening to, he said he didn't want to do it anymore because the first time he saw enemy fighters, he didn't do the peanut butter jam, and he burnt both barrels in the tail gun. And so he was like, I'm not doing this anymore. So yeah,
he just held it down.
Yeah. So Bucky being out there, that's why the crews jump. One guy gets hurt playing basketball. One guy gets a cold. A lot of them got colds from being up there and that. Yeah, a lot of them
freezing temperature.
A lot of them got sick, so that's why the crews were jumping and whatnot. And I think that's why people are upset because Band of Brothers followed Easy Company.
Yeah.
Like a company is what, a size of maybe 75 to 100 men. We're talking about the whole 100th bomb group, which is, I think, Baleen, what have we said? I think it's over 500 men and everything. Yeah, because about 50 planes, there's 10 men. Yeah, so that's kind of, and the crews are just jumping this and that, and it's a 50% 50% kill to death ratio, like not kill to death ratio, but you had a chance of survival is 50%,
Yeah.
and yeah.
So I read comments earlier today. Was on a post about Masters of the Air and things like that, and the comments on it are just so disheartening, especially coming from someone that has enjoyed every single war film that has ever been made, except for a couple. Um,
Pearl
and Band
Harbor.
of Brothers, the Pacific even, and it's so disheartening to see that because people aren't going into it with that type of mindset. They're not thinking logically about, the way that this film had to be shot, right? Like Bayou said, you know, Band of Brothers followed a company, Easy
Yeah.
Company. And so you followed the group of men in this company. You're following a bomb group, which is, almost the size of a regular army company. Um, and you also have to think that the attrition rate was just awful. And so these guys are getting shot up, shot down, and you don't know who's going to survive, who's going to die. And that's the point of the show. That is the point of the show, is to tell you, like, hey, you don't know who's going to survive. I listened to I, I I believe I put it in Bayou's chat on the Discord, but it was this interview with an older guy, and he was a veteran from the 100th Bomb Group, and he talked about how during their basic training or during their flight school, the instructor straight up told them, like, hey, look to the man to your left, look to the man to your right. All of them are going to die. And the quicker you come to terms with that, the better you'll be. And so these guys are going into it expecting to die. It's so sad. Young guys, young guys,
Yeah.
19 years old to mid 20s to early 30s,
Yeah.
expecting to die.
No, yeah, and that's pretty awesome. But it's cool to hear the interviews. And I think that's one thing I'm missing about this. Obviously, I know
Mm.
that all these guys are now
Mm-hmm.
dead, and you can't have like we had at Band of Brothers, where you had the guys
Mm-hmm.
still, a couple of them still lingering around. But I don't know if they could have dug up old interviews, or if they could have just had somebody from like the World War II museum that, I know Eddie, you're saying like they put a lot into this. Tom Hanks was there for the premiere of this and such, but just some type of historian talking about what went on. I think that mindset of those interviews helped to dive more into the group dynamic of what
But they
was
didn't have that in
actually
the
going
Pacific
on.
either. They missed that in the Pacific too,
I,
and that
if you
really, to me, it hurt the show. That was one of the
Yeah,
best parts about Band of Brothers
I
to me.
mean,
But
yeah, and I talked to Heather about this. Right, the way that Band of Brothers was filmed, the way the Pacific was filmed, the way that this has been filmed is all completely different. I put this kind of in the middle of the two. Pacific
yeah,
definitely, in terms of the warfare and what they were saying, was amazing, but they got into the Pearl Harbor love story
Yeah.
that ended up derailing how I enjoyed that. So this to me so far has kind of been in the middle of that, but I think we're kind of I miss those aspects of Band of Brothers, but of
yeah.
course, I mean, Band of Brothers is the best probably series of all time in my opinion.
Having the veterans on Band of Brothers, even just the little bit they had, there
Mhm.
was so many times that I teared up just
Yeah.
from them having them, and so that's just, it is missing a lot. And they have that. The World War II Museum has footage, the interviews with people from the 100th Bomb Group. And you could go to the World War II Museum. You can go, I don't know if you've ever been, and you can click and watch all these interviews all you want. So, I mean, they could have tried to use some of them, and I mean, they could have done it. But I wish they would have done that for this in the Pacific. But yeah, I see what you mean.
When Band
I
of
think
Brothers
with
came,
Band,
what were you saying?
no, go ahead.
No,
No,
no, no.
I was just saying, like, with Band of Brothers, you had, I mean, it was the early 2000s, and it was probably the late 90s whenever they started to interview. These guys weren't that, I mean, they were older,
No, they were
Mhm.
living while they made the show. Yeah, they were there when they made
75,
it.
80s, 75, 80 years old. With this, the greatest generation is slowly depleting. There's not
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
many veterans alive anymore, much less from the bomb group.
Yeah,
Um,
that's why I think I knew it'd be hard, but bringing in somebody
They could have gotten older footage.
to talk about from a historical perspective, not necessarily like the in person interviews from these people who actually lived it. But
I'll say this, and this might be a hot opinion, but if we just focus on s- centering around, oh well, this show's not Band of Brothers or this show's not
Hmm.
this, we're doing an injustice to the
Mhm.
men that
Hmm.
actually lived it.
yeah,
If we just center around it and compare them to a different unit, a different, um, I mean, I'm not gonna say branch because it was all the army, but if you're comparing these guys to say what the Band of Brothers, the Easy Company did, well, then we're taking away from what the guys
I'll
did
do
that
that. Yeah,
that did in the 100th Bomb Group.
yeah,
Well, yes, it is a TV show. Don't get me wrong, but this is a um, as accurate depiction of these people's lives, and we have to think
yeah.
about that. We can't
No,
think about comparing
Mhm.
it, to apples to oranges because they're two different things. One's up in the air and one's on the ground.
hmm
One's following a company and one's following a bomb group. So
I think we're
keep
saying that. I think we're saying the opposite. We're saying we want to hear from the real people. We want
no,
to
and
give
I'm not.
them more. We want to
I
give them actual.
I so
They're not with us anymore. But they could have used archival footage of interviews with them that the War
yeah.
II Museum has,
And
Mhm.
and
believe
that
people.
just would have just added so much more depth to the show. It would have made
Yeah.
it to people like to us. It's real because
Mhm.
we love this stuff. We've read it. We know it. But like someone like maybe like Bayou's wife or my wife who I mean, to her, it's more real because her grandfather was a B-17 pilot. He was shot down over Europe and everything. But to other people, it would have made it more real, not just a show. Does that make sense?
I mean, I don't think there's enough of the guys living today.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Oh no.
Archival footage. I'd have to use archival footage,
Yeah, we're not saying
interviews.
the actual people who actually
They
lived it.
interviewed him in the late '90s. The War II Museum started the interview process where they interviewed every veteran that existed that was still alive, and they have all those interviews at the War II Museum. You can go through and watch every single one of them
their
when you
YouTube
go to the War
channel's
II Museum.
great. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
in the '90s though, when they made like that was the first time you'd ever heard from them. I guess now that all of that stuff is online, like maybe that could be why they aren't doing it. It's because it's
It could
like,
Yeah.
be. I think to Bleen's point before, like people
yeah.
crapping on it online too, right? I
Oh,
mean,
it's
you didn't really,
so
we didn't
annoying.
really,
Well, that's
but we
that's
didn't really,
anything.
we
That's
didn't really have that,
anything.
but we
Yeah,
didn't really have that with the first two series, right?
That's
yeah.
exactly right.
We didn't
Think
have a Reddit forum where people can go on and freely post whatever they want in the anonymity of their
that's
username, right?
anything though. Think of
So
Star
Yeah,
Wars. If the original Star Wars, when they came out, if there was social media, people would have blasted them. I
Mm.
mean,
to
it's
build off of
anything.
that with what you're saying there, it, and I'm not gonna dive off the deep end. I'm just gonna say my 2 cents and leave it there. But if any sort of hate on a particular topic or a particular show and things like that, if any little ounce of hate is shared or talked about, then that's going to spread like
Yeah, that blows
wildfire.
up. Yeah.
yeah,
Negativity spreads far greater and far wider than positivity does.
hmm
Mm.
Um, and I think that's what is happening with this show is you have these history buffs that are coming out and then they just crap on it and they're like, "Yeah, well, this isn't Band of Brothers." You have these Band of Brother bros that just that's all they've ever known. That's what they grew up with, and
yeah,
it's not the nostalgia that they're wanting. And so, because and this was one of the topics I wanted to talk about was it's up in the air. You're not gonna fly around B-17s. Bayou mentioned it last time that we talked about it. These B-17s are tight as hell. Like you're not gonna physically record and fly in a B-17, so CGI is needed. And in my
Mhm.
opinion, the CGI is fantastic.
I think it
I
was great.
actually
Yeah.
enjoy the CGI. Like the episode, second episode, whenever they're crash landing in Scotland, I believe, or Ireland,
Scotland, yeah.
Scotland, I thought that was fantastic. And
Hmm.
then this episode alone, where it's that slow motion. I mentioned it earlier, of just hell breaking loose. I thought it was fantastic. I
And
think
seeing those,
they're doing a great job.
mhm.
Where Band of Brothers, everything was shot practical.
Yeah.
except for the parachute scenes.
Yeah.
Um, everything was shot practical. I mean, the Ardennes Forest was built in a hangar. I'm
Yeah.
not sure if people know that. The Ardennes was built in a hangar with trees being made out of
Paper mache,
cardboard and
yeah.
things like that, paper mache, and being blown up. This isn't that. You know, the times have advanced. I mean,
Mhm.
it's been over 20 years, 25 years since that show came out. Technology is advanced. So if we get away from all this stuff and just focus on the story at hand, but unfortunately, just hate is spreading through these forums of Reddit, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever it might be. And that's just highly unfortunate because I feel that hate is clouding the judgment and clouding the view that these men lived through this and their stories are being told. Their stories have already been told through books, and they're just taking that book and bringing it to life to
Hmm.
share with the world and with
Yeah.
people that
No.
aren't too familiar with them. I
Well
wasn't
said.
too familiar with the Bloody 100th, but now I am, and it's making me want to dive deeper into it. Especially being a guy that's in the Air Force. I'm not like Bayou. I'm not a flying crew chief or a crew chief in general. That has to do with the planes in specific, but I'm a part of an organization that did help build the airfields, that helped repair the airfields when they were bombed and
Mhm.
things like that. And to me, that's something I take pride in seeing something like this. So it's nice whenever you look at the story of the men and who's telling the story, how they're telling the story.
Yeah. Well said.
My 2 cents.
I think
And there's a
I think
there's
episode
a
3 is going to kill some of the haters. Um,
I think so.
because I don't think there's anything to complain about. Um, because one part is one I've had one troll. I love him to death, but he's a troll. But he was like, "It was just all action. There was no character development." And I was like, "All right, buddy." But then, like episode 3, and he's like, "It got me back into it. I like it again." I'm like, "Episode 3 was all action. Like it was character development through action. Like the war developed these men more so than anyone than in Hollywood could write. Like this was their story. That's how this happened. Like the action caused them. Like going to the Pacific, Eugene Sledge was some old country boy, and then all of that action that he
Hmm.
saw made him into this man who had
They
this
did great with him in
PTSD.
that. Yes. Yeah.
But like this Masters of the Air, the character development's gonna come, and I think episode 3 is just it's a lot. The fact that we have 6 more, and if anything of what episode 3 is gonna be like, oh my god, oh my god, yeah.
So going back and talking about character development, what you had mentioned it earlier. We followed a regiment, or not a regiment, a company,
Company. Hmm.
um, of men, and you know, Band of Brothers was based off of 2 books. It was based off of Band of Brothers by Stephen Ambrose, and it was also based off of Major Winner's memoirs, basically. So you're following these group of men, and the show is centered around that. Yeah, there's some things taken out. I read Band of Brothers again this most recent summer, and I also read Major Winner's memoirs as well this recent summer, and you see the buildup of what Band of Brothers is centered around on. These guys, what um, Bayou was talking about earlier, was these guys are moving around constantly. Men are being shot down constantly. So to center the focus of one character or 2 or 3 characters and center the focus on them, you're then taking the eyes off of what the group did. But if you're introducing characters here and there, like this most recent episode with Babyface, you introduce this character just a little bit, you start to, oh man, I kind of like Babyface. He's cute. He's a young guy,
Mm.
and then stuck in a ball turn and dies.
Yeah.
And it's so unfortunate. And I think that's what they're trying to get to is showing, yes, character development is great, especially for our 2 main leads, but I mean, just the small character development of
Yeah.
these little side characters is also important because that leaves what I was saying earlier. Unexpected. You don't know who's going to survive and who's going to die. It's very unexpected.
And if you want, I can't recommend enough. I don't know if you've ever seen. I love old World War II movies, adore old World War II movies, like The Longest Day, the D-Day movies, one of the greatest World War II movies ever made. And there's 12 O'Clock High. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie. It came out like in 1949 or 1950. I'll pull it up. Is very soon after World War II, and it's about this exact bomb run. This one, and I think the Black Thursday too. It's been a while since I've seen it. And the 1949 is when it came out, and this movie, the actors were actual B-17 crewmen who actually flew combat missions, and so they're the actors in the film, portraying what they did. And here it even says veterans of the campaign frequently cite that this is the only Hollywood film that accurately captured their combat experiences. And they even they use, of course, this is 1949. They're using real B-17s, and they even had stunt pilots crash land the actual B-17s. They'd go up, one pilot would take off on them. There'd be no one else in it except the one stunt pilot, which they didn't even think was possible to have one pilot control the plane, and he'd take off just to crash it for the for scenes for the movie. So 12 O'Clock High, I'd highly recommend y'all check that out if you're more interested. It's a great film. If you like old, it's campy, 1949, 1950 era movie.
Black and white.
But yeah, oh yeah, black and white, yeah. But I love those old movies. I mean, and this is the first one that they were like, all the veterans back then, from this one all the way to probably until Saving Private Ryan. This was like the first one where they're like, this one's actually like a good gritty. This shows what it was actually like, because a lot of them were more like tally ho boys and a little more campy and like John Wayne out there shoot, a little more action hero esque. But 12 O'Clock High wasn't. I'd recommend that one to you.
Okay.
We could do a review of it one day.
Yeah, I would like to do this more with other shows coming out and everything. This is so far out, but Blackbird on Apple TV was phenomenal. 6 episodes. It was really, really
I have to
good.
look it up. I don't. You
Don't
said
even
that,
look
but I
it
don't
up,
know
just
what it
watch
is.
Just watch it.
Oh,
Just watch it. Not with the kids though, but just watch it. Blackbird. But any other questions about Master of the Air, B-17s, any tactics or anything? I said this last episode, but I'll let you guys. You got anything, Baleen? No, we've been going at an hour and 7 minutes that flew by. Philly, anything that?
No, I don't even know if you guys can really answer it, but I find it amazing looking. The thing just popped in my head is looking at how like Buck's wings were like just completely torn to shreds, and how he actually would have made it / did make it / how can those things still fly when half the wing is missing? You're not getting that resistance coming up underneath the wings or anything anymore, and so how are they actually able to kind of stay in the air for that long? And
Yeah.
maybe that is Hollywood, a little bit of Hollywood thrown in there too. But
No, it's crazy.
It's science.
The lift and everything is really important on that. It's still providing lift, but that could be why they're having so much drag, which would hurt their fuel consumption. Also, the fact that their fuel tank was hit, but they did have foam inside that would kind of self hit and everything. But yeah. Oh, dinner time. Nice.
Oh, what's that,
Dinner
Baleen?
time, boys.
wow.
Curry and rice.
Look at that. Hey, did she ship to New Jersey? I'll take some.
From Hawaii?
Put in,
That'd be so gross. From Hawaii, it'd be so nasty. No, but there's pictures of 130s flying back from Vietnam and whatnot. I'll look up. They're crazy that they designed them to take it and whatnot. And I think that goes to Buck, and it's like, we're gonna sit here, we're gonna take it. When he said that, I was just like, God damn! That scene was nuts. I'm gonna close out on this. So the way that all of these officers, so the officers are going to be your pilot, co-pilot, navigator, and your bombardier. Okay, and so the way they would work is all these officers are like, hey, we want to be aircrew. They would go to a school, and then they would select, hey, you guys are going to be pilots. Okay, you're not good enough. You're going to be a bombardier. You're going to be a navigator and whatnot. And that's also part of why, if they were to go through the training and whatnot, like in Band of Brothers, it would have been hard. You would have been following Bucky and Buck. That's it. because they went through it together and then were in there long enough, and that's how they became majors. And then the other guys came later into the 100th. So that because all of them went to the school, the bombardiers went to a different one, and so the first school they would fly in single engine, and then they'd go to double engine, and then eventually would go to a 4 engine. But they don't start bombing until the fourth school. So I think it would just be a lot of moving around, and it would be difficult to have some of that training and whatnot. I'm sure they could have done it, but there's so much story to tell on all of their missions and whatnot that I think they just wanted to dive
Yeah.
right in. Yeah. But. And that again, shot down by Howard Snyder, is a great book, and it goes in. There's love stories. They're coming. I'm pretty sure because
I saw that from the previews.
all of but it's pretty historically
But
accurate
it,
though.
as
Yeah.
long as it's real, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
if it's real, it's
because
history. Yeah.
unlike Easy Company, they had downtime and they were at the
Yeah.
bars every night that they could be. When they landed, this is something that I think we can all appreciate. When they landed, the first thing that they would do is get a shot of whiskey and then go debrief. Like that was part of the culture, and
Yeah.
I mean, I'll be doing that myself because I got to keep the culture going, so I'll be drinking. But
For culture.
yeah, for the
But
culture.
that's how my grandfather met my grandma. She played piano at the pub near their air base.
Oh
And
dear
so they'd
God.
ride their bikes into the air base. I mean, into the village whenever they had leave and could go drink to the pubs. She played piano at the pub.
And
That's how he met her.
she had a pick of the litter.
Yeah.
she
What
got the,
what's the phrase? They were oversexed, overpaid, and overhear. That's what the
dear.
Brits said about the Americans.
I think that's a good way to go out. But I appreciate you guys doing that. Next week, maybe around the same time, for episode 4. They're in Africa, and we're going to see what they're going to be doing, and I am extremely excited. I just wish they would just drop it so we could do it, but at least we get this week to just be excited. But again, I appreciate you guys' time. We had 5 viewers at one time. We got 2 right now. That could be 2 of you guys, but I think people are liking this. The first episode, we actually had... Oh, Philly Tiger is there. Let's see how many views on it.
I'm there
70
as well.
views. Oh, no. That was 28 views. 28 views on
YouTube?
Yep. So
Nice.
for the kids. But I appreciate your time. We'll be here in the next one.
Bye.
All right, the stream